Hi, my name is Tabby and I hope you can hear me. My brother Ed told me that in my last video I was too quiet, so Ed, I hope you can hear me loud and clear. Actually, I need all of the men watching this video to hear me loud and clear because in this video I'm going to be convincing men to read books written by women. And you might be thinking, is there a need for that? Do men not read books written by women? You might be a man, you might be thinking, I do. Well, numerous studies have shown that while women read books by men and women pretty evenly, men overwhelmingly prioritise reading books by other men. There's this company called Nielsen IQ which specialises in bibliographic metadata. The Women's Prize for Fiction commissioned Nielsen IQ to do a study into this. Nielsen came with the cold hard facts. They studied 54,000 book purchases in 2023. And for the top 20 best-selling female writers, only 20% of the purchases were made by men. And that was actually mainly for classics. The stats were even lower for contemporary fiction. Only one of the top 20 best-selling female writers was purchased mainly by men, and that was Harper Lee. I think it's very interesting that it's the unisex name on the list, almost as though these men purchasing the books by Harper Lee didn't realise that Harper was a woman. Interestingly, Mary Seacart, she's a writer, radio presenter, journalist, I think she was assistant editor at the Times. She's pretty big time. She also commissioned Nielsen. Separate question of whether Nielsen is monopolising the book metadata market. But anyway, in the study that Seacart commissioned, of the top 10 best-selling female authors, the one that had the biggest male readership was L.J. Ross. And it's not about enjoyment. It's not that men aren't actually enjoying books written by women as much as they are books written by men. Goodreads data shows that when men actually read books written by women, they rate them marginally higher than they rate the books written by men. So with all of that in mind, I thought that I would do a video about the Women's Prize for Fiction. The Women's Prize isn't something I follow extremely closely. I don't specifically seek out to read the Women's Prize winners, but I've read a couple of prize winners recently for one of the book clubs that I'm in, and I looked at a list of all of the winners and I realised that I've actually read loads of them and really enjoyed them. Like, all of them are 4 or 5 star reads for me, which is quite unheard of. I think I'm quite a tough critic. I thought that I would do a video persuading you, all of you, but specifically if you're a man, why you should read some of these Women's Prize winners. And remember, the stats show that A, men aren't doing this enough, and B, you're more likely to enjoy it. So here is a pile of all the Women's Prize winners that I've read, and hopefully by the end of this I'll be able to persuade you to read at least one of them. In 1991, when the Booker Prize shortlist came out, of the 6 books shortlisted, none of those books were written by women, despite 60% of the books that were written in 1991 being written by women. And it was at this point that the idea for the Women's Prize was born. I'm trying to think about whether I should do this in order of how much I like them, or in the order that they won the prize. And I actually think, because I love so many of them, it's a bit like choosing between my children, so I think I'm going to do it in the order that they won in. First up, we have The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and this won the Women's Prize in 2012. When I started my book Instagram in COVID, where I post book reviews, this was actually the first book that I ever reviewed, so it always has a soft spot in my heart. I remember posting my book review to my 2 followers thinking, guys, one of the 2 of you should read this. The Song of Achilles is a retelling of the Trojan War from Patroclus's perspective. Patroclus was a young prince who was exiled to Peleus, and that was where Achilles was growing up. And despite their differences, the 2 became friends. The novel follows them right from their first meeting all the way to the exploits of the Trojan War. I think this book is one of the greatest love stories I've ever read. I read it in 2021. I think it's amazing that despite it being pretty widely known how the story of Achilles ends, you're still so engrossed and still feel everything so intensely. This book made me absolutely bawl my eyes out, and it's an easy 5-star read for me. I actually think I'm due a reread. If you've been to see the Odyssey, or you're going to see the Odyssey, and you want to keep that ancient Greek Age of Heroes mood going, then this is perfect. Okay, so that was the 2012 winner, and then I had my finger off the pulse with the Women's Prize for years, and the next one that I read is the 2018 winner, Home Fire by Camilla Shamsi. And I actually feel like people are going to get bored of me talking about this book, because I spoke about this book in my video about books set in London, and also weirdly my beach reads video, which I explained more in that video, but it's not typical beach reads. It's kind of just things that you want to read when you have long chunks of uninterrupted time. Home Fire follows a family which has boy-girl twins and an older sister, and the twins were basically raised by their older sister after their dad died. They're a British Muslim family living in London. Partway through the book, the brother becomes radicalised and leaves the UK to go to Syria, and he joins ISIS. The book then explores the impact this has on his family, and also another British Muslim family who the sisters both have interacted with in different ways, and that family, the dad is the Home Secretary of the UK. This book starts off relatively slow-paced, quite peaceful. It has some very beautiful descriptions of Islam. It's about the older sister as she's in the US. But as the book progresses, it transforms into a complete page turner. I was fully gripped. I mentioned this in another video, but my friend Charlotte came back from a night out early so that she could finish reading this book, and my friend Matt took it to Tesco with him and was reading it whilst doing his weekly food shop because neither of them wanted to stop reading it. So if that's not a testimony, then I don't know what is. The 2019 winner of the Women's Prize was An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. This book follows a young black couple in the US called Celestial and Roy, and we follow their story as Roy is falsely accused of rape of a white woman and imprisoned. I don't remember the details of this book as intricately, but I really remember enjoying it, and I remember the fact that, this isn't a spoiler by the way, it says it on the blurb, but when Roy is falsely accused of this crime, he goes to prison for many years, and then he comes out of prison and they're kind of expected to resume life as normal, whereas obviously both of them have been permanently changed by what happened. I really enjoyed the way that Jones tells the story, and I thought it was a really beautifully written, emotional, thoughtful book. In 2020, the winner was Hamlet by Maggie O'Farrell, and the film adaptation of this came out this year in January with Jessie Buckley and Paul Mescal. The premise of this book is that it follows Shakespeare's wife and family. Instead of the spotlight being on Shakespeare, arguably one of the most famous people ever, the spotlight is on his loved ones, and this is really emphasised by the fact that O'Farrell never says his name. She refers to him as the husband, or the writer, or the tutor, or the father. He's never once referred to by name. He's extremely decentered and peripheral to the story. There's obviously Shakespeare, his wife Agnes, and then they have 3 kids, boy-girl twins and an older sister. At the start of the book, the girl twin has taken ill and the boy twin Hamlet is looking to find someone who can help. The narrative jumps around a bit more. We learn about how Agnes and Shakespeare met, we learn about the start of their family, a bit more of their backstories. One thing that's really central in the book is that she's a healer, and her mum was quite a homeopathic herbal medicine expert and healed a lot of people through plants and different tinctures and things like that. And Agnes starts helping the people of the village with different things that she's brewed and different remedies that she's concocted. To me, the main point that this book was making was the aggressive decentralisation of Shakespeare as a character. So you can imagine my shock when I go to see it in cinema and Paul Mescal has equal amount of screen time to Jessie Buckley. I don't know why he had that much screen time. That was not the point of the book, and I feel like I can't even be that annoyed about it because Maggie O'Farrell co-wrote the screenplay, so it wasn't even as though somebody else took it and butchered her work. She was there. She agreed to it. I went to see it with my boyfriend and he told me that I was really ruining his viewing experience of the film because every time Paul Mescal was on the screen for an unrelated scene that wasn't in the book, I was like, why are we getting more Shakespeare? Do you not think that there's enough documentation of Shakespeare? The whole point of this book is that it's about his wife and kids. There's this scene in the film where it's Shakespeare on the beach of the Thames with his dog. About 20 seconds of screen time that's completely unnecessary in a piece of work that he's supposed to be peripheral to. Why is he there like that? Why is he so on the screen? I don't know if it's just because people like looking at Paul Mescal. Fair enough, but put him in another film for that. Why is he taking centre stage? And you know what? If it was just bonus content of Paul Mescal, that would have been one thing. But obviously, because of time constraints, all of this extra Shakespeare content meant that something had to be cut. And you won't guess what they cut in the film. The whole storyline about Agnes being a healer. Basically her whole career and her whole purpose of helping people in the village was completely minimised in the film. I think it was an extremely interesting creative choice that undermined what I took to be the point of the book, but as I said, Maggie O'Farrell wrote the screenplay, so she was clearly okay with what she did. And actually, I do think the film is really good as a separate standalone piece of art, and if I hadn't read the book and hadn't had these feelings, then I probably would have enjoyed it a lot more. This book is so good, and I really recommend it. So I actually did a 4-year-in-a-row streak with the Women's Prize winners because the next winner that I read was the 2021 winner, and that is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I spoke about this book in my Cozy Fantasy video, and I don't know if that's a bit tenuous because it's arguably not actually fantasy, it's kind of weird speculative fiction. This book is a compilation of journal entries by Piranesi. Piranesi lives in this seemingly infinite house. It's as though his whole world is house, so the upper levels of the house have clouds, the lower levels of the house have sea, and there's different vestibules and halls with different statues, and his concept of time and his sense of direction is completely based around the structure of the house. Piranesi sees himself as a bit of a scientist, so his journals are quite observational and evidence-based, and he's tracking the tides of the house meticulously and documenting everything. The way he speaks about the house is almost as though it's a deity that he's trying to make sense of. It's an extremely weird book, and even though parts of it are a little bit eerie or just a bit strange, the reason I included it in cozy fantasy is because it does have that cozy escapism feeling, and Piranesi as a protagonist is just so pure, and he gives everything the benefit of the doubt. He has this childlike wonder and optimism that you just can't help but enjoy reading. The next winner that I read was the 2024 winner, and that is Brotherless Night by B.V. Ganashananthan. This book I actually finished so recently. It is one of my book club books, and I'm really glad that it is, because otherwise I don't think I would have picked this up. And the first few pages aren't my normal style. It took me a little while to get into it, but I thought this book was really, really good. This book follows Sashi, who at the start of the book is a 16-year-old in Sri Lanka who is studying to be a doctor. We follow Sashi and her family of 4 brothers and her 2 parents and her neighbour from 1981 to 2009 throughout the Sri Lankan Civil War. A lot of the people in Sashi's community end up joining the Tamil Tigers, who were started as a guerrilla warfare militant group in response to their feelings that the Tamil people were being discriminated against by the Sri Lankan government. Her 4 brothers take very different approaches to what the right thing to do is. I think this book taught me so much more about the Sri Lankan Civil War than a non-fiction factual account could have. By focusing on individual stories in the atrocities, you're able to see the daily impact that it has on people in all of these different ways. One thing I found that this book did really well was showed what living in a war does to ordinary civilians, and also all of the non-violent things that people can do to help when they feel completely helpless. So whether that's helping people as a doctor, or whether that's documenting what happens and reporting on what goes on, which is even more important in a world where there's so much propaganda flying about and people aren't allowed to say the truth. It also raises a lot of questions about what doing the right thing is, what loyalty is, whether you should have loyalty to your family over your people as a whole, what loyalty to your people as a whole looks like, how to know when to act and when not to act. I really recommend this book. I think it's fab. The next Women's Prize winner that I read was The Safekeep by Yael van der Wooden, and this book follows Isabel, who lives this very solitary life in her mother's house, and she's extremely particular about, you know, putting the cutlery in the exact right place and keeping things clean, very meticulous about the house, and she's quite uptight and not very friendly or kind or generous or nice to speak to. That sounds really scathing, poor Isabel, but she's pretty difficult and bad vibes, to be honest. And then Isabel goes to meet her brothers and her brother's new girlfriend. She does not like this new girlfriend. The girlfriend's really chaotic and bubbly and just a bit confusing, and Isabel in her regimented life is thinking, who the hell are you? The brother's girlfriend ends up staying in the house with Isabel for a while. It follows their relationship. I'm not going to say too much more because I think that the best thing to do is go into this book blind, but the last third of this book is one of the best reading experiences that I've ever had. Whatever you think is going to happen, you're not ready for it. This is 5 stars for me as well. I think it's amazing. And then the final Women's Prize winner that I've read is 2026, this year, and that is The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. This is an epistolary novel which follows Sybil van Antwerp, a 70-something-year-old who loves writing letters. That's her primary mode of communication with her loved ones. But she doesn't just write to her loved ones. She writes to famous authors about their books. She has a pen pal who's this teenage boy who's going through a hard time. She writes little notes to her neighbours. We get a pretty complete picture of Sybil's life by reading her letters. And as a protagonist, I think she's great because she's a deeply flawed character, but I also found her extremely lovable. The Correspondent also does feel like a snapshot of someone's actual life, in that there are lots of different narrative threads and a lot of different things that you want to find out about, or different conflicts or emotional issues bubbling up. At one point, Sybil starts receiving these letters from an unknown person, and the letters are pretty threatening, so you're quite worried about who this antagonist is. She writes a lot to her brother, she writes a lot to her best friend, she has quite a strange relationship with her daughter. It's a really subtly moving book that I think is very artfully constructed. Because it's written in letters, it's quite a quick read because it just feels like you're reading people's conversation. There isn't much description, obviously, because it's just so focused on not dialogue, but dialogue in letter form. That brings us to the end of all the Women's Prize books that I've read. Live, Laugh, Love, the Women's Prize for Fiction. If you've read any of the other winners and you think they're good, then please let me know. And if you're a man and you've read some amazing books by women, then please let me know in the comments. Why don't we have a little exchange of information for the boys down there? I actually saw a YouGov poll that said that 40% of British people hadn't read a single book in the last 12 months, and that actually makes me feel deep fear inside, because I feel like nuance and critical thinking are on the out, and that's something that we really need. So we should all be reading more. We should all be recommending more books to each other. Let's get the literacy rates back up, people. Okay, I do think people still can read. I guess they're not called literacy rates. But the reading rates. I don't know why I'm suddenly making videos like a call to action. I don't know who I think I am. Like, me and my 70 subscribers are gonna up this statistic from 40%. But you know what? That's good, people. We can do it. Thank you so much for watching. Sorry I've been in a weird mood today. If you like book videos or hearing recommendations or just chatting about reading in general, then maybe subscribe to my channel, and I hope that you have a great day.